Okay, can you go ahead and start off by introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what you've been doing since graduating from Miami?
Sure. So my name's Poindexter, and I graduated this past May. I was in cohort 6, and I'm currently a first-year medical student at the University of Cincinnati. So I kind of went to more school. So that's kind of what's been keeping me busy.
Good stuff. What were some of your biggest obstacles moving from undergrad to medical school?
Sure. So when you hear like you're going from school to school, you'd think that a lot of the things that I learned in undergrad would translate in terms of study habits and things like that. But I noticed like a really big shift in like responsibility for learning. Whereas in undergrad, you kind of have like all these professors and all these resources that are really holding your hand. And it's not that like we don't have resources in med school, but there is much more an attitude of like you are responsible for your learning,
Right.
and like you have access to all these resources, but it's up to you to choose and figure out what's best for you. And like if you talk to any pre-meds, it's like, man, I have so much information to learn, and that's so true, and that's still true now. But with all of our courses and like clinical skills type things, we're not just asked to know the information. We have to like apply that in a like you're going to be a doctor sense.
Yeah.
Like you're going to learn about we're in a neuro block right now, and it's like, well, you're going to learn how this certain condition presents, and then you're going to walk into a patient simulation and talk to someone who has it,
Right.
and like have to figure that out and really apply that knowledge. So to like bring that all together, there's much more responsibility in our learning. Like we have to figure it out for ourselves, what works. So
Yeah. Was there anything unexpected going into medical school, or any like changes, or like when you moved from in-person learning to online learning because of the virus? Were there any unexpected changes, and then how did you overcome them?
Sure. So that's a good question. It has affected everyone in my class a little differently. So I found that going to the med school, attending lectures in person, and studying in a place that wasn't where I lived was really important for me. So it's been a little bit of a harder transition being at home, watching lectures from my living room. Kind of, that's been a challenge, sure. And there are some people in my class who were already doing that. So
Yeah.
for them, it's kind of more of the same. I'd almost say we have this saying at Cincinnati where every day, like you get 2 pancakes and you have to eat the pancakes. And because next day you're going to get 2 more pancakes.
Right.
And if you don't eat your pancakes, you're still going to get more pancakes the next day.
Yes.
And like 2 is reasonable, but like once you get up to like 8 and 10, like you're not gonna finish the pancakes.
Can't do that.
So I say all of that to say like you have to eat your pancakes every day. Like you have to watch lectures, you have to review things, and like you can't stop that train.
Yeah.
And that kind of pressure and attitude has been a lot of what's kind of pushed me through this time of like, I still need to learn this material. So
Yeah.
we're going to figure it out.
I definitely think it's similar with being an undergrad right now. It is easy to get behind, but you need to have like the self-discipline and be able to fix whatever you're doing and change how you're learning to adapt to the situation. So
yeah, absolutely. Like I see it as a very like iterative process of like you have to try something, see how it works, and then try something else, and just kind of keep going back and forth. And if anything, like they taught us to do that pretty thoroughly at the beginning of medical school by giving us exams constantly.
Yeah.
Which like was a really hard transition from undergrad, it's kind of like having finals week every week. Like, it's just nuts. But yeah, learn very quickly, like, what studying works and what does not. So.
Yeah, understandable. What was helpful from the Leadership Institute that you were able to take into this first year out of undergraduate?
I figured you guys were going to ask a question about this, so I actually thought about it. I'm realizing this actually, my biggest learning probably came from the time I was a TA rather than a student.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of a different role. But the phrase that kept coming to mind, especially over the past few weeks, is like, this world, it's not about you.
Yeah.
And like, that is kind of manifested itself in a few different ways. I think about like the feedback that we get as medical students.
Mm-hmm.
In most contexts, like, feedback is really hard to hear, but it is well-intentioned. It's meant to grow you no matter what.
Right.
And within like how I'm learning right now, like, I would much rather a standardized patient in a simulation tell me I'm being mean or condescending or like not explaining things well. I would much rather that be the case and learn how to do that than potentially marginalize a future patient. So
right.
In that respect, like, it's not personal. They just want me to grow.
Yeah.
And probably most recently, like most poignantly, when everything was being moved online, I think it was really easy to feel like our administration like didn't care about us and our learning, and like they weren't being like overly communicative or whatever. And it was really easy to believe that like, oh, they don't care about our transition or whatever. And I remember listening to a virtual town hall about all the different concerns of first year, second, third, and fourth years. And for those listening that don't know anything about medicine, the first 2 years of med school are like pretty much just like school.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second to third and fourth year are pretty much all clinical rotations. So like, you're actually in hospitals and all that kind of stuff. And after this town hall, third and fourth years ended up getting totally pulled from hospitals, which is massive disruption in their learning, a necessary one, but really tough. But I remember listening to this town hall, and my entire class, we were all hyped up about how like our faculty wasn't being like communicative, and like they weren't making all these concessions for us or whatever. And then the first question that gets asked is from this third year, and he just goes, I'm on this rotation and we're supposed to see 15 patients a day, and I only get to see one because everyone else is in contact precautions and they can't use the protective equipment for me to see them. Yeah. So I'm not learning, and I feel like I'm needlessly increasing my risk right now.
Yeah.
Like,
totally different.
I understand why our faculty maybe is doing other things right now. Like, they have whales to fry.
Right.
Before they get to like the little fish of M1 curriculum,
Yeah.
So like, this whole thing, like, it's not affecting my graduation. It's not really even affecting what I'm going to be able to learn because I'm preclinical.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, like, all of this wasn't about whether or not our administration cares about us. They care about us deeply. And they've been so wonderful at this whole thing. But I mentioned that whole thing to enforce this idea of like, the Institute taught me to really desire that context and understanding of why people act the way that they act. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, like, you can make false assumptions and destroy teams in your own experience. So it basically just enforced this, like, whatever's going on, it is very likely it's not like a unilateral me problem.
Yeah.
Like, the world is more complex than that. Yeah. So I kind of learned how to like approach problems a little more holistically, as well as having some peace when you don't necessarily have that full understanding, knowing that there probably is something else going on. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing us to interview you for our alumni panel. And
Sure thing.
we will see you on the 17th for the Embracing Change Summit.